Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is Amna Gul from the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at CAST. We're back with the course Fundamentals of Public Relations, bearing the code GMC 331, as well as the course Advertising for Media, bearing the code GMC 332. It's our 24th lecture today, and the topic is Techniques of Persuasion. It's a continuation of the last lecture. So, today we'll be discussing the appeal to logic, which is logos. Actually, logos is appeal to logic by relying on audience's intelligence and offering evidence in support of your argument. Logos also develops ethos because the information makes you look knowledgeable. Logos is important because logical arguments are not easily dismissed. So it's our discussion of logos, and we'll be viewing different examples of using logos, for, especially video advertisements that are using logos. We'll be also discussing logical fallacies, and then we'll end up with a discussion of kairos, which is also relevant to it, but I'll explain it later on. So logos is the Greek for the term word. It focuses attention on the message. It's often called a logical appeal or an appeal to reason. It points out internal consistency and clarity within its argument, and it frequently uses data to support its claim. Having said that, I'll start off with sharing an example of logos in an advertisement, and then we'll move forward with our discussion.
Lungs are like sponges designed to soak air, but some people use their lungs to soak up cigarette smoke. If you could wring out the cancer-producing tar that goes into the lungs of a pack-a-day smoker every year, this is how much you'd get. It's enough to make you sick. Very sick.
The video that we just saw, why is that an appeal to logos? Because it uses logic in terms of not just the words, not just the argument, but in terms of everything. It uses the example of foam for lungs, and it shows it practically that it is illogical to do this thing to your lungs, as they showed tar in those foam sponges. So the whole setup was, even the colors, it was all appealing to that logic, or appeal to logos. So an appeal to logical reason, logos is about the clarity, the consistency and soundness of an argument, from the premise and structure to the evidence and support. Rhetor appeals to logos by making reasonable claims and supporting those claims with evidence, such as statistics, other data, and facts. However, logical and reasonable arguments and evidence are not universal across audiences, contexts, cultures, and times. What an audience considers reasonable claims and adequate evidence is influenced by an audience's values and beliefs. Further, data and facts may evolve over time as we obtain more evidence, information, and data. You can use two different types of logic. You could use inductive logic by giving your readers a bunch of similar examples and then drawing from them a journal proposition. This logic is pretty simply given: this, that, and the other thing, proof. So here you go. There's a conclusion. Or you can use the deductive approach by giving your readers a few journal propositions and then drawing from them a specific truth, like because such and such is true, and such is true, and another such and such is true, and everybody agrees on the other thing. Then, poof, stands to reason, a new truth. So, but you need to develop logos. To use logos would be to cite facts and statistics, historical and literal analogies, and citing certain authorities on the subject. Logos can be developed by using advanced, theoretical, or abstract language, citing facts, which is very, very, very important, using historical and literal analogies, and by constructing logical arguments. Appeals to logos are an important part of academic writing, but you will see them in commercials as well. This is very common. We have just seen an example, and we are moving forward to seeing more examples of this. Although they may more commonly use, advertisements may more commonly use pathos and ethos. Advertisers will sometimes use logos to sell products. For example, commercials based on saving consumers money, such as, for example, car commercials that focus on miles per liter. These are appealing to consumers' sense of logos. Once again, I would like to share an example here, and then we'll move forward with our discussion. Were you impressed by the flow of arguments? How one thing linked to another and was very simply stated, yet those were very linked, and it seemed as if this was all very factual. There was no denying the fact that this all was factual. So let's learn how we can improve logos. Well, first of all, you need to be comprehensive. Make sure, as we just saw, it was a very comprehensive way of stating all the facts. So you need to make sure your points and arguments can be understood. We just saw an example which was very simply given but excellently proven. You should use language that your audience will understand. Once again, we just saw an example. You need to avoid jargon and technical terminology. You can use figures and charts dependent on the need. You can make the relationship between your evidence and conclusions clear, and this was one example where it was very, very clear that they developed a clear construction of argument where evidence and conclusions were seen. And you can use analogies and metaphors for that matter. You have to be logical, ensure that your arguments make sense, and that your claims and evidence are not questionable. You have a plan for dealing with opposing viewpoints that your listeners may already have, so you need to work it out. Ensure that the audience is involved by asking them engaging questions that can be in written as well as in face-to-face communication. Talk about opposing views, as this allows you to explain why your logical arguments are more reasonable. Build your argument on the audience's widely held beliefs, which are commonplaces. So use the audience's commonplace like a fact and apply it to a new situation. So if you want to encourage your class fellows, for example, to join a committee, use their commonplace, for example, rather than your belief, say, the committee needs considerate and kind-hearted people. So obviously everybody wants to be that. See? Then you have to be specific. Base your claims on facts and examples, as your arguments will be accepted quicker than something non-specific and non-concrete. The more easily the evidence is accepted, the more easily the conclusions will be accepted. Facts and statistics cannot be debated, and they signify the truth. Visual evidence such as objects and videos are hard to challenge. Citing specialists and authorities on a topic increases the quality of your evidence and therefore obviously of your claims. So you need to tell stories such as case studies or personal experiences. So the audience would like to hear your own stories if you are a specialist on that topic. So this way you can improve your logos. Now, how can you build your logos? As you work to build logos in your arguments, keep these strategies in mind. I'm just gonna name some of the most important ones. The first one is both experience and source material can provide you with evidence to appeal to logos. While outside sources will provide you with excellent evidence in an argumentative essay, in some situations, you can share personal experiences and observations. Just make sure that these experiences and observations are appropriate to the situation and you present them in a clear and logical manner. Then remember to think about your audience as you appeal to logos. Just because something makes sense in your mind, it doesn't mean it will make the same kind of sense to your audience. You need to try to see things from your audience's perspective. Having others read your writing, especially those who might agree with you, with your position, is very helpful. This is very important because there have been advertisements that failed because it was someone's perspective of seeing things. It seemed logical to some of the people or the people behind that advertisement, but to the general public, it did not seem logical. So you need to have your writings viewed by or reviewed by other people, especially those who might not agree with your position, so that you understand what sense others make out of that thing. Then the third thing, be sure to maintain clear lines of reasoning throughout your argument. One error in logic can negatively impact your entire position. When you present faulty logic, you lose credibility. And we're going to have a more detailed discussion on this. Finally, when presenting an argument based on logos, it is important to avoid emotional overtones and maintain an even tone of voice. Remember, it's not just a matter of the type of evidence you are presenting. Rather, how you present this evidence is also very important. Now we'll move towards the reasoning point of view that I said we're just going to discuss. So we are moving towards logical fallacies. Logos is about appealing to your audience's logical side. You have to think about what makes sense to your audience and use that as you build your argument. As writers, we appeal to logos by presenting a line of reasoning in our arguments that is logical and clear. We use evidence such as statistics and factual information when we appeal to logos. Fallacies are common errors in reasoning that will undermine the logic of your argument. Fallacies can be either illegitimate arguments or irrelevant points, and are often identified because they lack evidence that supports their claim. You need to avoid these common fallacies in your arguments and watch for them in the arguments of others as well. Many people who try to actually gain positive support, who try to gain good reputation, they make use of logical fallacies, which in the longer term results in negative public relations. Same is the case with advertisements. There are so many advertisements which make use of logical fallacies. But once again, it's a short-term benefit for a long-term loss. So you need to be very careful about it. And you have to be careful about other people displaying these things. If you have an understanding of these things, then you can avoid these. So we'll discuss some of the most important ones. I'll start off with the first slippery slope. This is a conclusion based on the premise that if A happens, then eventually through a series of small steps, for example, through B, C, or X, Y, Z, will happen too, basically equating A to Z. So if we don't want Z to occur, A must not be allowed to occur either. So this is a fallacy. This is not logically true. Second, history generalizations. This is a conclusion based on insufficient or biased evidence. In other words, you are rushing to a conclusion before you have all the relevant facts. For example, if someone says, even though it's the first day, I can tell that this is going to be a boring course. Now, in this example, the person stating is basing his evaluation of the entire course on only the first day, which is notoriously boring and limits to introductions for most of the courses. To make a fair and reasonable evaluation, the speaker must attend not only one but several classes and possibly even examine the course contents, talk to the teacher, or talk to others who have previously finished the course in order to have sufficient evidence to base a conclusion on. So it's just a hasty generalization. Generalizing things on the basis of, for example, a very short duration of time. Then, genetic fallacy. This conclusion is based on an argument that the origins of a person, idea, institute, or theory determine its character, nature, or worth. For example, the Volkswagen Beetle is an evil car. Why? Because it was originally designed by Hitler's army. Now, in this example, the rhetor is equating the character of a car with the character of the people who built the car. However, the two are not inherently related. So, this is a genetic fallacy. Fourth, begging the claim. The conclusion that the writer should prove is validated within the claim. For example, filthy and polluting coal should be banned. Arguing that coal pollutes the earth and thus should be banned would be logical. But the very conclusion that should be proved, which is the coal causes enough pollution to warrant banning its use, is already assumed in the claim by referring to it as filthy and polluting. So, once again, this is not appropriate. Fifth, circular argument. This restates the argument rather than actually proving it. For example, George Bush is a good communicator because he speaks effectively. Now, in this example, the conclusion that Bush is a good communicator and the evidence used to prove it, he speaks effectively, are basically the same idea. Specific evidence such as using everyday language or breaking down complex problems or illustrating his point with humorous stories would be needed to prove either half of the sentence. So it's kind of the same thing. Sixth, either or. This is a conclusion that oversimplifies the argument by reducing it to only two sides or choices. For example, we can either stop using cars or destroy the earth. In this example, the two choices are presented as the only options. Yet the author ignores a range of choices in between, such as developing cleaner technology, car sharing systems for necessities and emergencies, or better community planning to discourage daily driving. So it's not just a two options or two sides or two choices setup. Seventh, red herring. This is a diversionary tactic for diversion that avoids the key issues, often by avoiding opposing arguments rather than addressing them. For example, the level of mercury in seafood may be unsafe, but what will fishers do to support their families? Now, in this example, the author switches the discussion away from the safety of the food and talks instead about an economic issue, the livelihood of those catching fish. While one issue may affect the other, it does not mean we should ignore possible safety issues because of possible economic consequences to a few individuals. So, this is a diversionary tactic. Eighth, straw man. This moves oversimplifies an opponent's viewpoint and then attacks that hollow argument. For example, people who don't support the country's minimum wage increase hit the poor. Now, in this example, the author attributes the worst possible motive to an opponent's position. In reality, however, the opposition probably has more complex and sympathetic arguments to support their point. By not addressing those arguments, the author is not treating the opposition with respect or refuting their position. Ninth, moral equivalence. This fallacy compares minor misdeeds with major atrocities, suggesting that both are equally immoral. For example, that traffic police who gave me a ticket is as bad as Hitler. In this example, the author is comparing the relatively harmless actions of a person doing their job with the horrific actions of Hitler. This comparison is unfair and inaccurate. Now, all these kind of statements, these are very common, especially those in the public relations business. They knowingly and unknowingly make use of these fallacies and also fall prey to these fallacies, which in the longer run are very harmful. So, an understanding of these fallacies is very, very important. Having said that, in order to develop strong appeal to logos, we have to avoid faulty logic. Faulty logic can be anything from assuming one event caused another to making blanket statements based on little evidence. We have now, so far we have discussed all three techniques of persuasion. Each one is important in its own ways. There is uncertainty over which pillar is the most important. Aristotle thought that logos was vital, but when used by itself, it lacks impact. So ensure that you treat all three pillars with equal importance to succeed in persuading your audience. You see, this is an example of logos, but still it is using other things as well, especially pathos. Now, I would like to share an advertisement here, which is a detailed analysis of an advertisement. The advertisement uses the three, and then it is followed by an analysis of the whole advertisement. So let's watch that. You'll get a better understanding of that. Once we have done with that, then we'll move towards Kairos, which will be our last point for today. So let's watch.
Despite her education, her drive, her skills, her intelligence, she will automatically be valued as less than every man she ever meets. Or maybe I'll be able to tell her something different.
Audi's new commercials have a gender equality message with their new hashtag Drag
She will automatically be valued as less than every man she ever meets.
Boys giving her a hard time for the use of the father's rhetorical question is using pathos to provoke sympathy for his daughter who will be valued less than her. The car industry is male-dominated, especially car racing. By showing her winning, Audi is attempting to break down gender stereotypes around the car industries.
Or maybe I'll be able to tell her something different.
This is a subtle call for change for a progressive future. Audi is proving their credibility in using ethos by committing to equal pay for equal work and is relating to Hillary Clinton's women's rights campaign. This commercial was aired during the Super Bowl halftime to target a wide variety of viewers, including fathers with daughters and people who support gender equality. Audi used ethos by hiring Lisa McGarvey, a female director. Directing is another male-dominated profession. Hiring a woman exercises Audi's commitment to equal pay for equal work.
I hope you would have understood that an advertisement just not uses logos or only thos or only thos. Rather, it is a combination of all of it, and it is actually at the time of conceiving the idea and then drafting the copy that all these things fall into place, and these are well planned. Everything needs to be planned well. For example, father stating for a daughter or mother stating for a daughter, that makes a big difference. Having done with the techniques, now we are moving towards kairos. Kairos is the Greek word for time. Often for an ad or an argument or public relations to be successful, it needs appropriate tone and structure, and it has to come at the right time. In rhetoric, kairos refers to the opportune moment or appropriateness for persuading a particular audience about a particular subject. Kairos depends on a strong awareness of rhetorical situation. Kairos is the where, why, and when of persuasion. For example, nearly all op-eds and political essays are kairotic. The writers work to relate their ideas and messages to whatever is happening in the news and popular culture. Once again, I'll use a video example to explain kairos further.
A lot of people who study persuasion know about Aristotle's framework of ethos, logos, and pathos. Most persuasive when we have the right personal attributes, when the message is logical, and when our audience is touched emotionally. But did you know that there are other elements of Aristotle's approach? And one in particular, what he calls kairos. I have one. True story. Stacy's a single mom with a middle school son and increasingly bratty. The boy ignores his homework and spends all day texting and playing video games. And when he does communicate with his mom, it's usually just one syllable, or it's back talk. And not only does that bother her, Stacy's worried that things will get even worse in high school. She's tried grounding him, taking away his technology, standing over him while he does his math, and all sorts of other demanding control methods, but nothing seems to change. Then she decided to take away from him. Just the two of them, go camping and hiking and fishing. No friends, no homework, no Wi-Fi, no distractions, just mommy. Real conversations, real listening, and eventually real candor about how each of them was feeling. And it became a turning point in their relationship. Sure, the kid still has behavioral challenges, but there's a lot more patience and respect on both sides, and even some fun, as the relationship has started to grow. That's kairos, adapting a persuasion strategy to the situation. Stacy understood her son well enough to try a shrewder approach that just might work. In a way, it's like going to your toolbox and selecting the right tool for a job. You don't want to use a hammer on a screw. But until the camping trip, a hammer was the only tool that Stacy had tried. Kairos is more than this, though. There's no exact English translation. It's also about having the right timing for your message. Maybe even creating that moment so your message is delivered most powerfully. Notice that Stacy didn't just Instead, she set up a situation more amenable to deep communication and lasting change. Stacy choreographed that. She used not just ethos, logos, and pathos, but kairos as well, an advanced technique. She matched persuasion strategies to the situation and communicated at the most opportune time. For her, that was transformational.
Hope you would have understood that kairos is the kind of timeliness, like it's for all kinds of things. For example, when we discuss crisis communication and public relations, you have to do the right thing at the right time as well. Same as the case for advertisements. Obviously, we have discussed it quite a lot that there is a timing for advertisements. For example, in winters, do we have advertisements for, let's suppose, ceiling fans or room coolers? No, we don't have. Or about air conditioning. So this is all about timing. Remember that effective arguments use each of these rhetorical strategies to some extent. Some news articles may focus on connecting with the reader's empathy rather than presenting a lot of statistics, but logos is still likely to be involved to some degree. Some ads may really focus on what's hot now, which seems like a direct appeal to kairos, but also involves ethos by using a popular celebrity who serves as a credible source on new trends. So, in order to persuade your audience, proper use of ethos, pathos, and logos is necessary. That's all for today. Thank you.